So there's a couple of things that I want to get into. I've been wanting to do this since the release of Lostbelt 5, and that is the Olympian pantheon. We're going to talk about the Olympian gods, their counterparts, the invasion of Sefar, and the involvement of chaos. So we're going to kick it off with chaos. Going back into the real myth, chaos was a primordial concept that existed before everything was put into the universe. The planets, the stars, the people, everything, so on and so forth. This is what we have in Lostbelt 5. Basically, they're making a play on the same concept. In another universe, we find out that the ones that gave birth to chaos was actually an alien civilization. And this chaos isn't just a concept like it is in myth, it's a real entity with the same underlying principles. On the other side, you have the aliens trying to use chaos as a ship to take refuge on another planet. But for reasons that were unidentified, the aliens are no longer around and chaos was left to fend on his own. Chaos, being this primordial existence, decided that it was going to inhabit a planet whether the aliens were around or not. It comes to the boundary between their universe and ours, and using 9/10 of its miraculous powers, it was able to pass a group of ships into our universe. These same ships, just like in Greek myth, were known as the Titans, and the leader of these ships was Kronos, the same Kronos that began the line of Greek deities in myth. This would be our origin of the Greek timeline. And if you're familiar with this part of the myth, then you know that the Greek gods were the descendants of the Titans. They broke off into a war vying for their own independence, and this came to be known as the Titanomachia. In fate, the Greek gods diced the Titans up and they were no longer in the picture. From then on, the group of ships that were traveling around space became the Greek gods instead, and their leader, of course, was the great god Zeus. So after several thousands of years, they found out about Earth, and they realized that it might not be the best place for them to inhabit, but it's the best that they got. So they landed. They made their home base the area that gets introduced to us from their myth, which would be the region of Atlantis. This period, as you know, is still the age of gods, and their superiority over the humans that were already on the planet would give birth to the Greek pantheon, turning them into subjects of worship. So boom, it's 12,000 BC and the white titan Sefar shows up. And this is something that again was carried over from the extraverse into FGO. The white titan is an alien with power unlike anything we've ever seen. In FGO specifically, it ravaged the planet, it destroyed Atlantis, and it crushed the gods' original mechanical bodies and left them as divine spirits. You know, when you're a divine spirit, you're no longer a true god, you're just a god in part. So that's how it turned out in normal history. Pan history, greater history, all of those are the same thing. This would later come to be known as the Second War. Now, when you get off into the Lostbelts, which are technically just a what-if alternate dimension, Zeus was able to actually overcome Sefar and reprogram all the other gods and use their authorities as his own. They took Sefar out the picture with no problem, and all of the things that would have occurred in the normal timeline never happens. At this point, Zeus becomes completely busted. He's omnipotent and he's capable of taking down anything that happens to come his way. In normal history, this is when the Third War comes to the forefront. Now again, on this side of the spectrum, Sefar is the one that came out on top. Several thousand years have come to pass, and Sefar's body, which is what invaded the planet, spawned an entire alien civilization that the Greek gods had to fight against. But again, the Greek gods are now divine spirits. They're not as good as they used to be when they had their real bodies, and they are getting curb stomped. Now they gotta reach out to the humans for help. Heracles in particular is one of the many favorites who have been said to give them a clear advantage. You go to this same point in time in the Lostbelts, and the Greeks have murked the entire alien civilization. They didn't need help from the humans at all. Now we got the fourth and the final war, which is in the Lostbelt only, and this is one that became civil. You have one side of the Greek gods saying that they should give humans a fair chance Olympus and work at their side. This was Athena, Hades, Apollo, Hestia, Ares, and Hephaestus. The other side of the gods believed that they should maintain dominance and keep their overall authority. This was Zeus, Aphrodite, Hera, Poseidon, Artemis, and Demeter. Most of this was Zeus forcing these guys to fight on his side against their will. Since he was that strong, he had that much power. So the war goes on, and Zeus's side, the one that wants to maintain dominance, comes out on top, and the true machine bodies of the other side were killed and spread across the seas of Atlantis. Hades was in a position where he didn't want any part of it. So he self-destructed himself altogether so Zeus couldn't take advantage. At that point, he started to do more tampering. He had several layers of defense instated so people couldn't even get into Olympus. He had Artemis protecting the skies from space. He had reprogrammed his brother Poseidon to protect the city from the waters. And then you had the army from Atlantis protecting the land. This army was full of boosted soldiers. Then you had extremely powerful phantasmal beasts like Cerberus to back him up. He took over Aphrodite's identity, turning her alignment of love for humanity into hatred, and he was able to preserve his wife Hera after her death in the war by implanting her remains in the spirit of Europa. This boosted the spirit of Europa up to demigod level. Europa also being one of the people that Zeus took advantage of. And then the rest of the gods would just help him handle things that went down in the city. So the first one that we're going to get into is Demeter. She's the goddess of harvest and fertility, as well as being a mother goddess for Earth. I do want to point out that each machine god has their own humanoid terminal. These are mostly for communication, and this is how they would appear in Pan history. Looking over at Demeter's terminal, she is one of the many entities who has access to the authority Theron, which gives her the power of creation. To give an example of what type of energy this brings to the table, Tiamat and Bibi have this same authority. Tiamat using this to survive an outer dimensional plane and remask the surface of the planet, including the people, and Bibi just flat out being able to do whatever she wants on the far side of the moon. In her regular form, Demeter is somewhere in that realm. She's also known for giving life to the ambrosia, which are food and drinks of the gods that literally make you immortal. Flipping over into her counterpart, we have the machine god Demeter. Now, another thing that Demeter was known for was having her daughter captured by Hades and taken to the underworld to rule as his queen. Fate makes a play on this by having Demeter in a similar situation to Heracles, where Zeus manipulates her and has her kill her own daughter. It's for that reason that her Lostbelt counterpart, which is her true form, functions more like a berserker. That being that she's extremely powerful, but she's lost her sense of self because she went mad for what she's done. Her phantasm is a unique scream that comes out with an enormous amount of power. Just one hit from her phantasm can casually wipe out strips of land in an instant. We saw this happen when she was ravaging the city in Lostbelt 5. She literally pulled up and murked whole sections of the city in mere seconds. She used this to take out Helena, Edison, and Tesla back to back. I mean, obliterated. It stated that she can mow down the entirety of Olympus in half a day. And to add on to that, each one of the machine gods have their own micro machines that give them special abilities. With her being the goddess of the harvest, she has elements of regrowth. This comes out in a ridiculous ability to regenerate. She can regenerate all the way back from near death to full capacity in mere seconds. Her armor making her next to impossible to get through her health in the first place. She is canonically one of the hardest enemies we've ever fought in the entire story, and we had to get a ton of buffs, a ton of help, and one of the strongest weapons on the planet to stand a chance against her, that being the Black Barrel. People like Musashi, who again is one of the best servants out there, she had to get buffs to fight her. You had Canis in the mix, who was buffed up by Poseidon. Just using her phantasm and making Demeter flinch was regarded as impressive. Just making her flinch. She's just that strong. Next up, we have Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom and war. She is the one that cursed Medusa and her lore and sent her to the shapeless isle. Just like Demeter, she too is yet another mother goddess, meaning she has access to the power of creation. In her background, she is the holder of the equipment Aegis. Same thing goes for her father Zeus. In Fate, this comes to us as the protective armor that we see from Odysseus. You can see that it boasts an extremely high level of defense on par with the gods. Odysseus actually being able to wear this armor due to having Athena's blessing. Going over to her machine counterpart, she's no longer around. Therefore, she has no terminal. She is one of the few gods who went against Zeus and in turn was destroyed. The only thing notable that was left behind was her familiar Minerva, which houses some of her authorities. Her personal authority being a buff that raises combat abilities and grants a new skill to the user. Next, we have Poseidon. He is the god of the sea, storm, earthquakes, as well as the horses. He is the well-known brother of Zeus. He was the owner of the island Atlantis, which is pretty much the basis for the first half of Lostbelt 5. In some versions, he is even the father of the grand archer Orion. Being the god of horses, he is the one that gifted the two divine horses Balius and Xanthus that would later be used by the servant Achilles. He is the one that granted Canis the wish to be transformed into a male from female after he took her against her will. This is why she has access to his authorities as well as his trident. He is responsible for the birth of the spirit Asterios, and he's the one that gifted the divine horse Pegasus to the spirit Medusa. For his machine god version, he was redesigned by Zeus to be a guard for the great pit that takes you to Olympus. He too has lost his sense of self due to his battle with Francis Drake. In the waters, he can use his currents to shift a vessel in any direction that he pleases. He can move up to 115 miles per hour, and before you even get to him, he has several divine cores that act as a layer of defense that's on par with holy grails. That's just how he's coming. His unique ability allows him to increase his combat when he's out at sea, and we only know his phantasm by name. Then you have Hephaestus, who is the god of fire, blacksmiths, and forgery. He is the husband of Aphrodite. He's the one that made numerous amounts of equipment that you see in Greek myth, this power extending to the level of making divine constructs. He made the armor and the shield for Achilles. He made the armor Aegis for Zeus. He made the thunderbolts for Zeus, and he created the machine Talos that belongs to Europa. There's also the fact that he created Pandora, the wielder of Pandora's box. In his story, he decides to help us against the gods. He's the one that reforged Achilles' armor into the divine bow and arrows that we use for Orion. This helped us take down the Lostbelt Artemis, even after being destroyed by Zeus and having half of his information stolen. His creations are said to be greater than anything Chaldea could even think of. You also have the fact that since Prometheus sided with humanity in the original myth and gave them fire, his remains have been merged with Hephaestus in the Lostbelt's lore. So now they operate as a collective entity, and they function as the core of Olympus for Zeus. You have Apollo, who is the god of the sun, arts, archery, prophecy, and healing. He is the twin brother of the goddess Artemis. He comes to us as a sheep that tags along with the spirit Paris. He is the originator of the Greek martial arts. He was a mentor for Chiron, who went on to teach most of the heroes that appeared in Greek myth in general. He is the one that intervened in the Trojan War and guided Paris to seeing the weak spot of Achilles, which is his heel. He is the father of the hero Asclepius. He's also the one that empowers Atalanta alongside Artemis when she does her phantasmal barrage. He has an authority that allows him to turn Paris into an arrow for Orion. Since he has EX independent action and he's merged with Paris as a spirit, this allows Paris to do nearly anything that he wants. Next up on the roster, we have Aphrodite, who is the goddess of love and beauty. She is an earth mother goddess, having access to the power of creation. She is the wife of the god blacksmith Hephaestus, and she's mostly known for her divine intervention across multiple lores. She is the one that helped Jason by manipulating Medea into taking her own father's life. She is the one that promised Paris that he could steal Helen and go back to Troy. This is literally the same incident that started the entire Trojan War. She gave Hippomenes the apples that manipulated Atalanta, which later caused her to be cursed by Zeus and turned into a lion forever. She's really out here the raw way. Now, in contrast to her original lore, her pan history version actually feels bad about the things that she's done. You know, they gotta make everybody a good guy. Her Lostbelt counterpart, however, is more true to her original myth, where she's just doing her job and she could really care less about how anybody feels about it. She is one of the few guys that don't have a unique boost. It's stated that no heroic spirit on their own would be able to touch her, and she's delighted at just the idea of bodying every single one of the Lostbelt kings. The Lostbelt kings are goons, and she's running through them with no problem. It took Kentucky's super phantasm to hold her down, a buffed up Canis and Mash wielding one of the 7 super weapons to stop her. You also have the statement from Dioscuri saying that she can destroy any normal servant with ease. Her phantasm sings a song that gives off manipulation. This allows her to take control of a target and tamper with their soul, forcing them to cause destruction against their will. We saw this happen with Musashi. She can do this to almost any being, and only a select amount of servants will be able to negate this. Next, you have Ares, the god of war and the god of courage. He has the same functions as his Roman chief god counterpart, which is Mars. He's notably known as the father of Hippolyta from Strange Fate, as well as Romulus and Penth from Grand Order. His phantasm, of course, being the great photon ray. This is one of the strongest weapons in Fate. It's literally known as the sword of Mars, and it's the same weapon that was used by Altera back in the Extraverse. Reason being is that when Sefar beat Mars in their final battle, she straight up swiped his sword, and Altera, being an avatar for Sefar, was able to don this same weapon over in Extella. The sword itself has the ability to devastate massive areas by pointing out bat signals into the sky and literally shooting giant laser beams out of space. I can't make this up. He was actually so tilted about having his sword stolen that every time the phantasm gets activated, it's really just him firing his strength into that location just out of pure rage. His most notable skill is a war cry that brings out an unrivaled level of confidence in the people around him. As of the Lostbelt, since he lost his sword, he now rocks a great sword that scales several stories high. He was also one of the main components to summoning Grand Lancer Romulus. His familiars are the great Stymphalian birds, the same birds that Heracles had to defeat in one of his labors. He is one of the only people that could go blow for blow with Zeus, even if that was only for a short amount of time. With him being the last god to fight Sefar, there's no mention of him having a terminal form. Next, we have Artemis, goddess of the hunt, the wild, and the moon. She is the daughter of Zeus and the twin of the Olympian god Apollo. She is the lover of the spirit Grand Archer Orion. In the past, she's the one that took care of Atalanta when she was abandoned in the wild. She was able to do this by watching over her, as well as sending out a bear to ensure her care. Her temple is literally one of the 7 wonders of the world. She's an Earth Mother goddess, and in her pan history form, she's been stripped of majority of her power. In her form as a heroic spirit, where she hijacked Orion's slot as a servant, she's shown a range of highly impactful strengths. This includes rapid firing massive arrows that you would see from a divine spirit. She has a phantasm that can one-shot a guy in the nuts using Orion as the bullet. Why that exists, I couldn't tell you. Then there's her actual phantasm, which is extremely powerful and causes confusion upon landing. When it comes to her machine god counterpart, she is one of the 3 defense systems to get inside of Olympus. She literally operates from space. It took Orion several buffs from other gods and prep time on the level of Batman to destroy her. She can only be destroyed by divine concepts, which is why we had to use the armor of Achilles as a bow to go against her. Similar to the scenario with Poseidon, she has divine cores that act as a layer of defense before you can even get to her true health. Her phantasm can operate in a short amount of time, and it was literally word for word designed to destroy entire planets. That's just how she's coming. She can restructure her own arrows based on the target just to ensure better damage. And in the Lostbelt, just trying to find a way to rival her level of strength was causing Hephaestus to go into a meltdown. The dude was in overload. Next up, we got Hera. She is the goddess of marriage, family, childbirth, and of course, Zeus's main squeeze. She is the reason behind a countless amount of incidents running behind Zeus, who, as we know, was dunking on every woman in existence. She rules alongside Zeus as the queen of Olympus, and unlike the other Olympians that had their bodies destroyed in war, Zeus was so crushed at the idea of losing his wife that he fused her remains with the spirit Europa. Luckily, she decided to help us against Zeus since she felt like his Lostbelt counterpart was too far gone from who he originally was. As Europa, she has access to the divine bull that Zeus took form of in his myth, the Taurus bull, the Zodiac. This is also her phantasm. She has several layers of protection from being Zeus's wife. She has the bronze talos that was gifted to her from Zeus. This is an elite machine from the age of gods that can only be harmed by something on the level of a god. It can literally turn its hands and feet into lava just for offense, and it can automatically perceive threats. She too is an earth mother goddess having access to the power of creation. She is the one that manipulated Heracles into taking the lives of his own wife and children. She is the one that gave Heracles his power as a demigod, being the one that nursed him when he was a child. This would be the origin of his new name, Heracles, in the first place. Then we got Hades. He is the god of the dead and the ruler of the underworld. He is the one that abducted Demeter's daughter. He self-destructed to prevent Zeus from taking over his body. My boy said, I don't want any parts of that. He is the original owner of the 3-headed hellhound Cerberus, which we see as a part of Lostbelt 5's story. In Strange Fate, we see this as a familiar for Heracles. On top of that, he has the authority to dissolve certain targets directly into atoms. We saw Zeus use his authority on Kentucky's great noble phantasm. He is the original owner of the invisibility cap that allows you to conceal your presence, which we've seen used by Gilgamesh back in Prisma Ilia. This was also used by Athena, Hermes, and Perseus back in the original myth. It is in fact one of the 5 items that was used by the hero Perseus to take down Gorgon Medusa. Next, you have Hestia. She is the goddess of peace, cooking, and structure in the homes of Olympus. She is also the goddess of sacrifice. When it comes to the Fate lore, she is one of the lesser knowns, but we do know that she was destroyed by Zeus. And then of course, the big kahuna, Zeus, the god of the sky, lightning, and order. He is the husband of Hera. They rule over the entirety of Olympus. He is the ringleader of all the Olympians that I've mentioned. He is without a doubt the strongest deity among them all, his authority being his lightning, which we know can casually destroy planets. He has been stated to be stronger than servants that can destroy the entire world, Arjuna Altar being the example. In his Lostbelt form, we see that he has some extraordinary powers, we had to use every top tier element at our disposal in order for us to take him on. We had a buffed up Musashi, a buffed up Mash, the super weapon, the Black Barrel, a buffed up Canis with the authority of Poseidon, Grand Lancer Romulus, who on top of being one of the strongest Grands in Fate, is pulling from the power of the god of war Mars, the actual intervention of the god of war Mars, the conceptual defense of Aegis from Athena, overloading command spells. We did it all. Zeus's power is so great that he had to put limiters on his own capabilities. He is one of the only entities that has an ancient god level of power. He can manipulate and change the rules of space, remaking gravity as he saw fit. He can negate concepts. He can negate dimensions. He can manipulate instances of the galaxy at his pleasing. Just using 35% of his limits, this man was about to destroy the entire planet, and that's just giving us the light version of his power. In reality, Zeus was ready and willing to destroy the entire universe by the end of the Lostbelt. If you're looking for one of the biggest threats in Fate, you've definitely found him, and it gets even bigger than that. We had to go against the mothership of all the Greek gods in general, that being Chaos. Chaos has access to all of their authorities. It's the one that created them along with everything else. It has all their powers, every concept under the sun. It can technically do what it wants. Right after he showed up, he fired a beam that was faster than the speed of light with the power of the sun. Just firing off one of these shots at us was not only strong enough to one-shot the god Ares, but Ares was also a demiurge with multiple godly capabilities. Chaos was about to revert the entire planet back to its original state. Particles. It was by sheer luck that we only had to ward them off. Of course, there's way too much of this to squeeze in one video. This is mostly just highlights. We're gonna come back around with the don't sleep on the Olympians, so be on the lookout for that.